Hi there. Tonight we journey back over 600 years to the twilight of one Korean kingdom and the bloody birth of another. Picture the scene. The royal court is a sea of shimmering silk, the air thick with the scent of expensive incense and simmering political plots. Powerful aristocrats, their robes still faintly echoing the fashion of their former Mongol overlords, whisper behind painted fans. Outside the palace walls, however, a kingdom is groaning under the weight of corruption and foreign threats. This is the Goryeo dynasty in its final glittering, decaying days. And for you, an ordinary person caught in the gears of history, this is not a drill. Let's be honest, living through a dynastic transition is the historical equivalent of trying to cross a freeway on foot during rush hour. Your chances of making it to the other side are slim. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I always love seeing where you're all tuning in from, so drop your city and local time in the comments below. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing on the banks of the Yalu River, a line of water separating Korea from the vast expanse of China. It's the year 1388. The air is heavy and damp, a summer rain threatening to turn the ground beneath your straw sandals into a muddy soup. You are a soldier, one of tens of thousands, huddled together on a miserable patch of land called Wihua Island. Your stomach is a tight knot of hunger and anxiety. Your commander, the most respected military man in the kingdom, is General Yi Seong-gi. He's a man carved from the northern frontier, tough, charismatic, and a brilliant strategist who has spent his life fighting off Jurchen raiders and Japanese pirates. He has a reputation for being undefeated, a living legend. But the order he's been given from the capital Kaesong seems like madness. King Yu and his chief minister, a powerful but reckless general named Choa-yong, want you to march north. They want you to cross this river and attack the mighty Ming Dynasty of China. The brand new formidable Ming Dynasty that just kicked out the Mongols and now controls all of China. It feels like you've been ordered to punch a mountain. The supplies are low, the summer rains will spread disease and rot your bowstrings, and the timing is all wrong. Invading a massive northern neighbor during their farming season, while leaving your own southern coast vulnerable to pirate attacks. It's a spectacularly bad plan, even by the standards of a government that's become more focused on lavish Buddhist ceremonies than practical statecraft. You can feel the dissent humming through the ranks like a trapped wasp. The men whisper. They look to General Yi, and then he makes his move. He gathers his officers and lays out his case, what historians now call the four impossibilities. He argues that a smaller state attacking a larger one is folly, that campaigning in the wet summer season is unwise, that moving the army north will invite pirates to attack from the south, and that the monsoon rains will cause epidemics and make their composite bows, held together with fish glue, utterly useless. It's a compelling argument. Instead of marching to certain death, in Liaodong Yisongye makes a fateful decision. He turns the army around. The banners pivot. The drums beat a new rhythm. You are now marching south back toward your own capital. It's a coup. You may not even realize it at first, but every step you take away from that river is a step toward shattering the Goryeo dynasty, which has ruled for over 470 years. The march is swift. When you arrive at the gates of Kaesong, there is shock, but not as much resistance as you'd think. The people are tired. The government is a mess of squabbling clans and corrupt officials who have amassed enormous untaxed estates, leaving the state treasury empty and the peasants destitute. General Yi's army is seen less as an invading force and more as a cleaning crew. He deposes the king exiles and executes his rival General Chu and installs a puppet monarch. But he's not a king yet. For 4 years, he and his faction of reform-minded scholar officials, the Sadebu, carefully dismantle the old system. They launch a sweeping land reform, seizing the vast estates of the pro-Mongol aristocracy and the powerful Buddhist temples, and redistributing them. This one move wins them massive support from the peasantry and refills the state's coffers. It's a brilliant piece of political maneuvering, cementing their power before they even claim the throne. Historians still argue whether Yi Songae was a reluctant patriot who turned his army around at Wihua Island to save his nation, or a deeply ambitious man who simply saw the perfect excuse to seize the power he had long coveted. The truth, as always, is probably a messy combination of both. He was a product of his time, a time when survival often meant being a step ahead of your rivals. Finally, in 1392, the last puppet king of Goryeo is conveniently encouraged to abdicate. The throne is empty. It's time for a new dynasty, but what to call it? In a fascinatingly quirky move that shows the geopolitical reality of the time, Yi Songae doesn't just pick a name. He selects 2 possibilities and sends them to the Emperor of Ming China for his approval. The choices were Hanyang, his hometown, and Joseon, a name that harked back to the very first semi-mythical Korean kingdom of Joseon. It was like asking your incredibly powerful new neighbor to help name your baby. The Ming Emperor chose Joseon, and with that, the Joseon dynasty was officially born, its legitimacy sealed not just by military might, but by the blessing of the regional superpower. The old world of Goryeo, with its Buddhist piety and aristocratic excess, is washed away. A new era, one that will be defined by strict Neo-Confucian ideals, scholar bureaucrats, and a legacy lasting over 5 centuries, has just begun. And you, the soldier, have survived the transition for now. A new dynasty needs a new home. Your first king, now known by his temple name Taejong, understands this better than anyone. The old Goryeo capital of Kaesong is filled with ghosts and grudges. Every corner houses a family that lost land power, or a relative in your recent, let's call it a corporate restructuring. It won't do. To truly cement his rule, Taejong needs to physically break from the past. And so begins the great search for a new capital city, the Joseon equivalent of a nationwide house hunt, only with way more geomancy involved. You, having survived the war, are now put to work. First, surveyors and scholars scour the peninsula, not with maps of resources, but with compasses and charts of spiritual energy. They are practitioners of Pungsu, the Korean version of feng shui. The idea is to find a location that is auspicious, a place where the natural landscape of mountains and rivers will channel cosmic energy to protect and empower the dynasty for centuries. A spot near Mount Gyeryong is considered not far from modern-day Daejeon, but it's ultimately rejected. The perfect site, they decide, is a place called Hanyang. It's a location of immense power, nestled in a basin with the Grand Begak Mountain to its north, and other peaks cradling it like a fortress. A wide, gentle river, the Han, flows to the south, acting as a protective barrier and a commercial artery. It's perfect. So in 1394, the work begins. You're now a conscripted laborer, one of nearly 200,000 men tasked with raising a capital from scratch. The air fills with the rhythmic clang of hammers on stone and the sharp scent of freshly cut pine. You haul dirt, raise earthen ramparts, and watch as grand wooden structures begin to climb towards the sky. The man overseeing this grand project, the chief architect of not just the city but the entire dynasty's political philosophy, is Jeong Do-jeon. He was General Yi's kingmaker, the brilliant Neo-Confucian scholar who laid the intellectual groundwork for the coup. Now he's designing the kingdom's operating system, and he infuses his philosophy directly into the city's bones. The main royal residence is named Gyeongbokgung, the Palace of Great Blessing. And in a wonderfully nerdy bit of trivia, Jeong Do-jeon names the palace's 4 main gates after the 4 cardinal virtues of Confucianism. The south gate for government affairs is Gwanghwamun, but the main eastern, western, and northern gates are named for righteousness, propriety, and wisdom. It's a daily architectural reminder of the ideals the state is supposed to uphold. You, of course, are probably less concerned with the symbolic righteousness of the gate you're carving, and more concerned with whether your rice ration will have any millet in it today. While you build the physical foundations of the dynasty, its political foundations are cracking. The source of the trouble is family. King Taejong has 8 sons. The most ambitious, ruthless, and undeniably competent of them all is his 5th son, Yi Bang-wan. He was a key player in the coup, a man of action who personally eliminated political opponents when his father hesitated. He and his brothers from Taeho's first wife, who has since passed away, expect a reward. Yi Bang-wan, in particular, believes he has earned the title of Crown Prince. But King Taejong, now older and deeply in love with his second wife, Queen Sindok, makes a disastrous decision. Pressured by the queen and advised by Jeong Do-jeon, he bypasses all of his capable, battle-hardened adult sons. Instead, he anoints his youngest son, Yi Bang-seok, Queen Sindeok's child, as the heir to the throne. The boy is barely a teenager. To Yi Bang-wan, this is an unforgivable betrayal. It's also a direct threat. Jeong Do-jeon, his great political rival, is now the official tutor and protector of the young crown prince. Herein lies a conflict that defines the dynasty's early years. Historians still argue whether the first strife of princes was merely a savage power grab by a slighted son, or if it represented a deeper ideological battle. Jeong Do-jeon envisioned a state where the king was a benevolent, symbolic figurehead, guided and governed by an assembly of wise scholar ministers like himself. He saw Yi Bang-wan as a dangerous strongman who would centralize all power and rule as an absolute monarch. Yi Bang-wan, on the other hand, saw Jeong Do-jeon's plan as a recipe for disaster, creating a new aristocracy of powerful ministers who would inevitably become as corrupt as the Goryeo lords they had just overthrown. He believed only a king with an iron fist could forge a truly strong and stable nation. In 1398, the powder keg ignites. Queen Sindeok dies of an illness, removing her son's most powerful shield. King Taejong is lost in grief. Yi Bang-wan, learning that Jeong Do-jeon and his faction are planning to preemptively eliminate him, and his brothers decides to strike first. You might be a palace guard on a dark, rainy night, when suddenly the peace is shattered by screams. Yi Bang-wan and his private army storm a villa where Jeong Do-jeon is having a party. It's a massacre. Jeong Do-jeon is cut down. Yi Bang-wan then marches his men to the palace gates. His soldiers find his 2 youngest half-brothers, the crown prince and his brother, and kill them without hesitation. Royal family dinners in this household just got incredibly awkward. The news breaks King Taejong's heart, He is king, in name only a horrified puppet, whose city and family have been savaged by the son he overlooked. Utterly defeated, he abdicates, handing the throne to his compliant second son to act as a placeholder. But everyone knows who is really in charge. Yi Bangwan, the fifth prince, has won. He has carved his path to power with a sword staining the new capital's foundations with the blood of his own kin. The beautiful Confucian ideals inscribed on the palace gates now look down on a city seized by brutal, bloody ambition. For 2 years, the brand new Joseon dynasty finds itself in a bizarre limbo. Your new king Jeongjong sits on the throne in the grand palace at Hanyang, but he's a king in the way. A scarecrow is a farmer. He occupies the space, but doesn't make any decisions. Everyone knows the real power is his younger brother Yi Bangwan the prince, who holds the title Lord of Jeonggan. King Jeongjong is so uncomfortable in the city his brother conquered with blood that he even moves the capital back to Kaesong, the old Goryeo home base. It's a move that screams, "I'm just keeping the seat warm, please don't kill me." The tension is palpable. Yi Bangwan's older brother, the fourth prince. Yi Bangwan gets it into his head that if bloody ambition is the new path to power, he might as well give it a shot. This results in the brief and utterly predictable second strife of princes, where his forces are promptly crushed by Yi Bangwan's far superior military machine. With this final domestic challenge swept aside, the charade can end. In the year 1400, King Jeongjong wisely abdicates, and Yi Bangwan finally ascends the throne he craved. He is King Taejong. His first act is to move the capital right back to Hanyang, which he renames Hanseong. The message is clear: the brief holiday from his ambition is over. Now the real work begins, and Taejong's work is all about ensuring that no one ever can pull the same stunt he did. He is obsessed with centralizing power and kicking out the ladder he so expertly climbed. His most famous and impactful reform is the immediate abolition of private armies. As a citizen of Joseon, you're used to seeing local magnates and princes with their own liveried soldiers and personal armories. It was a major cause of instability. Taejong, having used his own private army to seize the throne, knows exactly how dangerous they are. He issues a decree all private soldiers are to be absorbed into the central government's army. All private weapons are to be turned over to the state. With this single brilliant stroke, he defangs the entire aristocracy. The only man with an army now is the king. But to control a kingdom, you need more than soldiers. You need information. You need to know who everyone is, where they live, and what they owe the state. And so King Taejong introduces one of history's earliest forms of national identification, the Hopai system. You as a male, over the age of 16, are now required by law to carry a small tag, a Hopai. If you're a high-ranking official, it might be carved from ivory or fine hardwood. For a commoner like you, it's a simple block of wood, maybe ash or birch, with your name, birth date, and social status burned into it. You must present this tag to guards at the city gates, to officials collecting taxes, to anyone with authority. It's the 15th century equivalent of getting carded at a bar. But if you forget your ID, you don't just get turned away, you get arrested for vagrancy. It's a profoundly effective tool for social control, tax collection, and military conscription. Taejong's court is a place of cold, efficient, and terrifying order. He is a micromanager with a paranoid streak a mile wide. He strengthens the judiciary and creates a special state tribunal, the Uigombu, which functions as his personal investigative body, a royal CIA, for hunting down traitors. Whispers of dissent are met with swift, merciless action. Even his own family isn't safe. In fact, they are his primary targets. This is most evident in his relationship with his wife, Queen Wongyong. Her family, the powerful Min clan, had been his greatest supporters, funding his private army and hiding weapons for him before his coup. But on the throne, Taejong sees them not as allies, but as a threat, a rival power base. One by one, he brings charges against the queen's 4 younger brothers. Treason, corruption, disrespect, the accusations pile up, and soon, all 4 men who helped him achieve his dream are executed. The queen is, to put it mildly, enraged. Their life in the palace becomes a bitter war zone of recriminations and political maneuvering. Historians still argue whether Taejong's destruction of his in-laws was a cold, pragmatic act of statecraft to eliminate any potential rivals, or if the toxic, combative dynamic of his marriage fueled a personal vendetta that played out on the national stage. Either way, the lesson was clear. Being a royal in-law during Taejong's reign was a job with a very short life expectancy. Yet for all his brutality, he is an astonishingly effective ruler. He stabilizes the political system, breaks the power of both the old aristocracy and the Buddhist temples, and creates a highly centralized bureaucracy that answers only to him. He reforms the tax code, introduces paper currency, and fills the national treasury. He does all the dirty, bloody work required to build a lasting foundation for the dynasty. He even manages a strained reconciliation with his father, the abdicated King Taejong, who lives out his days in a separate palace, a sad and lonely figure. Having forged a kingdom of iron and blood, Taejong, in his later years, makes his most important decision, choosing a successor. He initially picks his eldest son, a libertine who proves unfit to rule. He then turns to his 3rd son, Yi, a quiet, bookish young man who seems to be his father's complete opposite. In 1418, in a move of incredible political foresight, Taejong abdicates the throne to his son, but continues to hold on to military power, acting as regent. He spends the last 4 years of his life personally eliminating any final threats to his son's authority, ensuring the smoothest power transition imaginable. He built the house, and now he's making sure the front door is locked and bolted before handing the keys to his brilliant son, the man who will become Joseon's greatest king. The air in the palace has changed. Under your old King Taejong, it was sharp and cold, laced with the metallic tang of fear. Every official watched his words. Every minister walked on eggshells. Now with his son on the throne, the atmosphere is entirely different. You've gone from a king who interrogates to a king who asks questions. The tension has been replaced by a low, constant hum of intellectual curiosity. King Sejong, the bookish 3rd son, who never expected to rule, is now in charge, and the whiplash is giving the entire court a mild case of vertigo. His father did the dirty work of forging the kingdom's cage. Sejong's job is to fill it with wonders. His first and most beloved project is the Imjin, the Hall of Worthies. Imagine a royal think tank, a grand library and research center rolled into one established right within the palace walls. Sejong scours the country for the most brilliant young scholars, men of talent and promise, and gives them a simple, breathtaking mandate: learn everything. You are one of these scholars. Your days are spent among towering stacks of scrolls, the air thick with the scent of old paper and fresh ink. You debate astronomy, music theory, agricultural science, and military strategy. And unlike with his father, the king isn't a distant, intimidating figure. He's right there with you, a portly, enthusiastic man, often staying up past midnight to join a debate or check on an experiment, his mind as hungry as his appetite. This is the engine room of Joseon's golden age. But it raises a fascinating question for later generations. Historians still argue whether the staggering output of the Hall of Worthies was the product of Sejong's personal hands-on genius, with him acting as lead researcher for every project, or if his true brilliance was as the ultimate facilitator, a master at identifying talent, providing resources, and cultivating an environment where innovation could bloom on its own. Was he the inventor or the world's greatest project manager? Either way, the results are undeniable. Sejong is obsessed with practical science that helps the people. For centuries, Korea has relied on Chinese calendars, which were often inaccurate for the Korean peninsula's longitude, throwing off planting and harvesting schedules. Sejong tasks your colleagues with creating a uniquely Korean calendar, one based on the skies above Hanyang, not Beijing. This quest leads to a flurry of invention. You help calibrate beautiful new armillary spheres to track the stars and design ingenious automated water clocks. Most famously, you help create the Angbu Ilgu, a clever cauldron-shaped public sundial, marked with lines that even an illiterate commoner could understand to tell the time. Perhaps the most revolutionary piece of technology is the Chugugi, the world's first standardized rain gauge. It's a simple concept, a metal cylinder of a specific height and diameter, but its implications are enormous. Identical gauges are distributed to every provincial office in the kingdom. Now, for the first time, the government can collect accurate empirical data on rainfall across the entire country. If you're a farmer in the fertile plains near modern-day Taejong, this means the government knows exactly how much rain your region got. They can better predict harvests, anticipate droughts or floods, and most importantly, assess taxes more fairly based on actual conditions, not just guesswork. It's data-driven governance in the 15th century. For all his intellectual might, Sejong is a deeply human figure. One of his most well-documented traits is a passionate, lifelong love of meat. In an age where Confucian ideals preached frugality and courtiers often ate simple vegetarian fare, Sejong's dining table was a carnivore's paradise. He adored beef and was an avid hunter. Court records are filled with worried officials begging him to eat less meat for the sake of his health, as he suffered from various ailments, including diabetes, in his later life. He'd promised to cut back, but his resolve would quickly crumble. He was a king who could revolutionize astronomy, but couldn't resist a good steak, a relatable flaw in a near-mythic ruler. All these achievements, however pale, in comparison to his masterwork, Sejong is deeply bothered by a fundamental injustice literacy. The written language of the court is classical Chinese, a system requiring the memorization of thousands of complex characters. For a farmer, a merchant, or a soldier, learning it is impossible. This means the law, agricultural manuals, and medical texts are locked away from the very people they are meant to serve. So, in deep secrecy, working with a small trusted team from the Hall of Worthies, Sejong embarks on his most radical project. In 1446, he unveils the Humiliation, or the proper sounds for the instruction of the people. It is a new native alphabet for the Korean language. It is breathtakingly simple and elegant. The consonant shapes are designed to mimic the shape of the human mouth and tongue when forming the sound. The vowel symbols are based on a simple philosophy of heaven, a dot earth, a horizontal line, and humanity, a vertical line. With just a couple dozen letters, anyone can achieve literacy. It's so efficient, it was said that a wise person could learn it in a single morning. This invention would probably put a lot of professional scribes out of a job if they weren't so busy protesting it. The elite scholar officials are appalled. They see it as a barbaric, undignified script that insults the prestige of Chinese characters. But Sejong holds firm. He understands that to truly empower his people, he must give them a voice. And with this single act he does. He takes the unshakable foundation his father built with blood and iron, and on it he builds a nation of learning science and a shared voice that echoes to this very day. For all the talk of kings and palaces, of golden ages and bloody coups, the story of a dynasty is truly written in the dirt. So let's leave the gleaming tile roofs of Hanyang behind. We travel south down the peninsula into the fertile heartland of Chungcheong Province, the very region where you might be listening from in Taejong right now. The grandeur of the court fades into a landscape of rolling hills and wide green rice paddies shimmering under the late July sun. The air, thick with the promise of an afternoon thunderstorm, smells of damp earth and growing things. You are no longer a scholar or a courtier. You are a sangmin, a commoner, a farmer. And this is your world. Your life is governed by two relentless forces, the seasons and the state. You wake before the sun, the rough texture of your hemp clothing, a familiar feeling on your skin. Your home is a small thatch-roofed house with walls of wattle and daub, and a packed earth floor shared with your parents, your spouse, and your children. The concept of privacy is a luxury you cannot imagine. Your days are a cycle of backbreaking labor, transplanting rice seedlings in the spring, endless weeding in this summer heat, and the frantic push of harvest in the fall. It's the kind of work that makes you feel every single muscle in your body, a job that comes with 0 vacation days and a terrible retirement plan. You are the base of the Great Pyramid of Joseon society, and it is a heavy weight to bear. Officially, the kingdom is divided into 4 classes. At the very top sits the Yangban, the scholar aristocracy. You see them on occasion, the local magistrate or a landowning family passing through the village. They wear elegant silk robes, tall black hats, made of woven horsehair, and they never ever work with their hands. Their entire existence is dedicated to studying Confucian classics, to pass the civil service exams, a path to power completely inaccessible to you. Below them are the Chungin, the middle class. These are the technical specialists of the dynasty, the translators, the astronomers, the doctors, the accountants. They possess critical skills, often passed down within their families, that keep the bureaucracy running. They are the overworked IT department of Joseon, essential respected for their knowledge, but forever barred from holding the highest ministerial posts. Then there is your class, the sangmin. You are the farmers, the fishers, the artisans. You make up the vast majority of the population, perhaps 75% or more. Your taxes pay for the Yangban silk robes and the Chungin's ink brushes. Your conscripted labor builds their fortresses and palaces. You are the sturdy, unglamorous foundation of the entire kingdom. And beneath you, at the very bottom, are the Cheonmin, the base people. This is a diverse group of outcasts, butchers, leather tanners, shamans, jailers, and most numerous of all, the enslaved people known as nobi. You look down on them as society demands, but the line between your life and theirs can be perilously thin. A single bad harvest, a crippling debt, and you could be forced to sell yourself or a child into servitude falling into the very class you disdain. On paper, this social structure appears as rigid as stone. But life is always messier than the official documents. Historians still argue whether the Joseon class system was a true caste you could never escape, or if there were hidden pathways for advancement. For the most part, you are what you were born. But there were cracks in the wall. A wealthy merchant, technically a sangman, might be able to buy a forged genealogy, a fake family tree that would allow his grandson to study for the exams and become a yangban. A strong young farmer might pass the military version of the state exams and gain a small title and some land. It wasn't common, but the dream was there, a flickering candle of hope in a life of prescribed duty. This sense of duty is infused into every aspect of your world by Neo-Confucianism. It's not just a philosophy for scholars, it's the operating system for your entire life. It dictates the 5 relationships: absolute loyalty, from subject to ruler; absolute filial piety, from son to father; rigid separation of duties between husband and wife; respect for your elders; and trust between friends. Your marriage is arranged by your parents to benefit the family. Ancestor, worship. The Jesa ceremony is the most important religious ritual, reinforcing the unbreakable bonds of kinship and your place in a long line of succession. In this rigidly ordered world of clear social roles, there exists a strange and fascinating contradiction, the kisang. You might see them at a banquet thrown by the local magistrate. They are by law members of the lowest Cheonmin class on par with servants. Yet they are also the most cultured and educated women in the kingdom. They are professional entertainers trained from a young age in music, dance, calligraphy, and classical poetry. They are expected to converse wittily with Yangban officials, challenging them to poetic contests or soothing them with the music of the Gayagiyam, the 12-stringed zither. They occupy an impossible social position, legally despised, but culturally celebrated, a source of both artistic admiration and moral condemnation. Your world as a farmer in the heartland is small. The grand pronouncements from the capital rarely touch you directly, though you must carry your Hopai identification tag, a reminder of King Taejong's reach. And while King Sejong's new alphabet Hangul exists, all official documents and respectable writing are still done in complex Chinese characters. Your life is the soil, the family, the village, and the spirits of your ancestors. You are the silent majority, living and dying in the same fields as your forefathers, your sweat and toil, the engine that powers the entire grand, complicated, and often contradictory world of Joseon. The Golden Age, like all beautiful things, was fragile. King Sejong the Great passes from the world, and the bright light of his reign begins to flicker. His chosen heir, the brilliant but sickly King Munjong, lasts a mere 2 years on the throne. Suddenly, the most powerful seat in the kingdom belongs to a 12-year-old boy, his grandson, King Danjong. And a boy king, no matter how noble, is a vacuum of power. Nature and politics abhor a vacuum. You've just arrived in the capital Hanyang. After years of solitary study on your family's estate in the provinces, you have passed the grueling Guajio civil service exam. Your head is filled with the pure, uncompromising Neo-Confucian ideals of loyalty and justice. You are ready to serve your young king and the nation. You quickly discover, however, that the court is not the honorable assembly of scholars you read about. It's a viper's nest. The air already thick and heavy, with the late July humidity that precedes a typhoon, feels electric with conspiracy. The center of this storm is the boy king's own uncle, Prince Sejong. He is King Sejong's second son, a man who inherited all of the ambition and ruthlessness of his grandfather, King Taejong, but none of Sejong's scholarly patience. He watches the powerful ministers who surround his nephew and sees a threat to the royal bloodline's authority. He believes the kingdom needs a strong adult hand, his hand. In 1453, he strikes. In a swift, bloody coup, he assassinates his chief rivals. For 2 years, he consolidates his power. And then in 1455, he persuades his terrified 12-year-old nephew to abdicate. Prince Sejong takes the throne, becoming King Sejong. The boy king, Taejong, is exiled, and a few years later, forced to drink poison. Being the boss when you're 12 is tough. It's even tougher when your uncle has a thirst for power. This single act of usurpation cracks the moral foundation of the dynasty and splits the ruling Yangban class in two. On one side are the Honggu, or the meritorious faction. These are the men who supported Sejong's coup. They are the insiders, the pragmatists, the powerful ministers who are rewarded with titles, land, and wealth. They are the establishment. On the other side are the Sarim, the forest of scholars. These are men like you, idealists from the rural gentry, who are horrified by Sejong's brutal power grab. To the Sarim, a king who takes the throne from his own nephew is no king at all. Many of them resign their posts in disgust and retreat to their provincial estates, establishing private academies to teach their strict, unwavering brand of Confucian morality to the next generation. This deep division raises a fundamental question about the era. Historians still argue whether the century-long war between the Honggu and Sarim factions was a true ideological crusade over the nature of justice and legitimate rule, or if all the high-minded talk of philosophy was just a respectable veneer for what was essentially a turf war between the entrenched sole elite and the ambitious gentry from the provinces. As decades pass, you and your fellow Sarim scholars slowly filter back into the government, often at the invitation of kings who want to check the power of the overbearing Honggu ministers. You get appointed to positions in the three offices, particularly the office of the Censor General, whose job is to criticize the king and other officials. It's a mandate to be the official opposition, and the Sarim take to it with relish. You write scathing memorials, pointing out every instance of corruption and every breach of protocol by the Honggu faction. You make a lot of powerful enemies. This sets the stage for the Sahwa, the great literati purges. Imagine this. The king is now Yonson Gun, a paranoid and violent tyrant. Your Sarim colleagues have been working on the official history of the previous reign, and one of them includes a subtle but critical account of King Sejong's usurpation. The Honggu ministers see their chance. They take the document to the king and frame it not as a historical debate, but as a direct, treasonous insult to his great-grandfather. The king explodes in a rage. The purge begins. You watch in horror as your friends and mentors are dragged from their homes, their crime writing history. They are tortured, executed, or exiled to remote islands. Their families are destroyed. It's the Joseon version of corporate downsizing, only instead of a pink slip, you get a death sentence. Writing a critical poem is no longer just art. It's a potential career ender, and a life ender too. In this terrifying environment, where direct confrontation is suicide, the Sarim develop a unique form of political protest, strategic resignation. When a king makes a decision you find deeply immoral, you and dozens of your colleagues will collectively resign your government posts. It is an act of supreme political theater, a silent passive-aggressive protest that signals to the entire country that the government has lost its moral authority. It could paralyze the administration and was one of the few weapons the outnumbered Sarim had. This bloody cycle of purges and protests will repeat 4 times over the next 50 years. The Hungu faction, holding all the practical power, crushes the Sarim again and again. Yet the Sarim never truly die out. From their academies in the countryside, they foster a new generation of scholars fueled by an unshakable sense of moral righteousness. And with each generation, they return to the capital ready to fight again. The court of Joseon is no longer a hall of worthies. It is a battlefield of ideas where a misplaced word is as deadly as a sword, and the ink on a scholar's brush is either a tool for justice or the ink of his own death warrant. The bitter factional wars that defined your life as a scholar official have finally mercifully cooled. After decades of purges and protest, the Sarim faction has emerged victorious. They now control the court of King Seonjo, filling the government with their members confident in their moral and intellectual authority. But 2 centuries of relative peace, punctuated only by internal political bloodshed, have made the kingdom myopic. While you and your colleagues were busy writing scathing memorials about each other, the world outside was changing. A storm has been gathering, and Joseon has been facing the wrong way. Across the sea in Japan, a century of unending civil war has finally concluded. The nation has been unified under the iron will of one man, Toyotomi Hideyoshi. He is a brilliant, ruthless, and colossally ambitious warlord who rose from peasant status to become the absolute master of Japan. He now commands a battle-hardened army of hundreds of thousands of samurai, and he has a new, almost insane objective, the conquest of Ming China. To get there, however, he needs a highway. And your Korean peninsula is that highway. The warning signs are there. Hideyoshi sends envoys demanding safe passage. Worried, your king sends his own delegation to Japan to gauge the threat. And here, the factional politics you know so well rears its ugly head with catastrophic results. The 2 lead envoys, one from the established Easterner faction and one from the rival Westerner faction, return to Hanyang and give the court completely opposite reports. The Westerner Hwang Yun-gil gravely warns that Hideyoshi is armed to the teeth and an invasion is imminent. But the Easterner Kim Seong-il, seeking to calm fears and score political points, dismisses Hideyoshi as a posturing buffoon. The court, now dominated by the Easterners, chooses to believe the comforting lie. It is the single most disastrous he said, she said in Korean history. Preparations are stalled. The threat is ignored. Then, on a quiet spring morning in 1592, the bill comes due. You are standing on the docks of Busan, the main port on the southeastern coast. You see a black line appear on the horizon. It grows and grows until the entire sea is blotted out by ships. It is a fleet larger than any ever assembled in Asia, carrying the first wave of an army of over 150,000 men. This is not a pirate raid. This is an apocalypse. The local commanders fight with desperate courage, but they and their men are slaughtered. The Japanese forces are not just veterans of 100 battles. They carry a terrifying new weapon in huge numbers, the arquebus, a matchlock musket. Your brave Korean archers, the pride of the military, are mown down by disciplined volleys of lead shot before they can even get close enough to return fire. The Japanese brought guns to a bow and arrow fight, and the result is a massacre. The collapse of the Joseon military is terrifyingly swift. Historians still argue whether the Joseon army was a fundamentally rotten and outdated force, or if it was simply strategically unprepared for this specific brand of lightning-fast, large-scale, amphibious assault. Whatever the reason, the defensive line evaporates. Fortresses that were supposed to hold for weeks fall in hours. The main Joseon general Sin Rip makes a stand with his cavalry near Chungju, but his forces are annihilated by Japanese musketeers. The road to the capital is wide open. You are now a refugee. The orderly Confucian world has dissolved into chaos. The roads heading north are a river of human misery, families fleeing with whatever they can carry. The air filled with the cries of the lost and the smell of fear. The oppressive humidity of the approaching summer, the same heavy air you feel in Taejong on a late July night, feels like a shroud. Within 3 weeks of the landing at Busan, the Japanese vanguard is at the gates of Hanyang. King Seonjo and his court, who had spent more time debating which general to appoint than actually preparing defenses, make their final decision. They abandon the capital. The king and the royal family flee north towards the Chinese border, leaving their people to their fate. Turns out, the king's greatest military asset was his sprinting ability. The magnificent Gyeongbok Palace is burned, and the capital falls. Your country is now under enemy occupation. The Japanese are brutal masters. They establish a reign of terror, seizing food supplies and enslaving locals. In a particularly gruesome practice, samurai collect the noses and ears of slain Koreans as trophies, pickling them in barrels to be sent back to Japan as proof of their conquests. The kingdom is broken. Your government has fled. Your army is shattered, and all hope seems to be extinguished under the rising sun banner of the invaders. But an invasion force, especially on a peninsula, has a fatal weakness: its supply lines. The Japanese army may control the land, but all their food, ammunition, and reinforcements must come by sea. And while the Joseon army has been routed, its navy has not. Down in the southern provinces, one admiral, a quiet, stubborn man named Yi Sun-sin, who had been sidelined for years thanks to factional politics, is gathering his ships. The Japanese army is a sword plunged deep into the heart of your kingdom. But if this one man can cut off the artery that feeds it, the sword itself may just wither and die. On the mainland, your kingdom is a smoking ruin. But the story of this war has two fronts. We turn our gaze now from the choked and dusty roads of the north to the wide blue expanse of the southern sea. Here things are different. Here there is a fighting chance. You are a sailor now, your hands raw from handling coarse rope and heavy oars. You serve in the Jola Province fleet under the command of Admiral Yi Sun-sin. He is a man of unnerving calm, his face a quiet mask that betrays none of the immense pressure he is under. He was once demoted because of the same factional politics that blinded the court to this invasion, but now he is Joseon's last hope. His quiet confidence flows through the fleet. You are terrified of the Japanese, but you are more terrified of failing him. Your ship is a Panoxion. It's not sleek or fast, but it is a beast. A tall, sturdy floating fortress with thick pine planks and a flat bottom that lets it turn on a dime in the shallow coastal waters you call home. Its high sides make it difficult to board, and its deck is a platform for a terrifying array of cannons, from small swivel guns to massive heaven character cannons that can blast a hole in anything they hit. And then there is the Admiral's secret weapon, the Geobuxion, the turtle ship. It's an ugly, brutish thing low in the water and covered by a curved roof. From its prow juts the head of a dragon, which can spew out choking smoke or fire a cannon. It's not a pretty sight, unless, of course, it's on your side. Then it's the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. That roof is the turtle ship's most famous and debated feature. Historians still argue about the exact construction of the ironclad top. Was it fully plated with overlapping hexagonal iron sheets, making it a true 16th century ironclad? Or was it a wooden shell studded with hundreds of sharp iron spikes designed less to stop cannonballs and more to make any Japanese soldier's attempt to board a very painful and very short experience? The exact blueprints are lost to time, but the effect is not. It is a machine built to smash enemy lines and terrify their crews. Admiral Yi does not wait for the Japanese to find him. He hunts them. In a series of brilliant naval sorties, at places like Okpo Sacheon and Dongpo, he establishes his tactics. He refuses to fight the Japanese in the open ocean, where their grappling hooks and larger numbers could overwhelm him. Instead, he uses his knowledge of the coastline to his advantage, luring them into narrow straits and confusing channels. There, his superior, longer-range cannons can tear their fragile ships to pieces before they can even get close. You watch from your post on the Panoxion, the roar of your cannons deafening as you witness Yi's strategy unfold. The Japanese fleets, which had sailed from Japan with such arrogance, are systematically ambushed and annihilated. The Japanese high command is enraged. They have conquered a kingdom on land, but are being choked at sea. They divert a massive portion of their navy under their most experienced commanders with one simple order: find Yi Sun-sin and destroy him. Yi knows he is critically outnumbered, so he lays a trap. On a hot, hazy morning in July of 1592, on a day much like the one ending now, he brings his fleet to the waters off Hansen Island. He sends a small detachment of 6 Panoxion to sail directly towards the Japanese fleet. The Japanese Admiral, Wakizaka Yasuharu, sees what he thinks is the entire Joseon Navy and orders a general pursuit. The bait is taken. The Japanese ships, a fleet of over 70, chase your 6 decoy vessels into a wide open bay. You are on one of the main fleet's ships, hidden just out of sight behind the island, your heart pounding against your ribs. Then Admiral Yi gives the signal. Your tiny decoy fleet executes a sudden, swift turn. At the same moment, your main fleet emerges from its hiding place. In one fluid, beautiful motion, your ships pivot and form a massive U-shape around the mouth of the bay. It is the legendary Hagikjin, the crane wing formation. The Japanese fleet has sailed headfirst into a kill box. Their path of retreat is cut off. They are enveloped. The roar of 100 Joseon cannons erupts at once. The turtle ships charge into the panicked mass, smashing oars and ramming hulls. The Japanese ships, packed too tightly to maneuver, crash into one another. It is a slaughter. In a few short hours, the Japanese fleet is annihilated. Yi Sun-sin does not lose a single ship. This one battle changes everything. It gives Joseon control of the seas, crippling Japan's ability to resupply its armies on land. The entire invasion, so successful just weeks before, grinds to a halt. Throughout this hellish campaign, Admiral Yi kept a daily meticulous war diary called the Nanjung Ilgi. It's now a UNESCO World Treasure, and it is an astonishingly intimate document. In its pages, he is not a myth, but a man. He records the weather, his battle plans, his dreams, his frustrations with the king's court, his sorrow over the death of his mother, and his constant anxiety over the health of his men and the state of his nation. Reading it is to look into the mind of a genius at the highest point of pressure imaginable. It may be the most stressful journal ever written. With the Japanese advance stalled, Admiral Yi becomes the sole protector of the realm. While his king is a refugee and the land army is a scattered mess, this one quiet admiral and his fleet of tough sailors and terrifying turtle ships have, against all possible odds, saved the dynasty from utter collapse. He has given a nation on its knees a reason to stand up and fight again. The Japanese are gone. The war that consumed a generation finally ended in 1598, not with a decisive battle, but with the death of the warlord Hideyoshi, which prompted his armies to withdraw. All across the peninsula, from the capital down to the fields of Chungcheong, a collective, ragged sigh of relief is breathed. But the kingdom you are left with is a pale ghost of its former self. Fields are overgrown, villages are collections of burned-out huts, and the government bureaucracy is in shambles. The population has been ravaged. You, a survivor, are tasked with the slow, agonizing work of rebuilding a shattered world. In this precarious time, a new king Gwanghaegun ascends the throne. He is a pragmatic and intelligent ruler who understands his kingdom's weakness. He looks at the world and sees Joseon caught between a rock and a hard place. To the east is the Ming Dynasty in China, the old power, the parent state that sent an army to help you against Japan and to whom you owe an immense debt of loyalty. But to the north, a new power is rising with terrifying speed. The Jurchens, who are uniting under a brilliant chieftain named Nurhaci, and will soon call themselves the Manchus. Gwanghaegun tries to navigate an impossible diplomatic path, paying public respect to the Ming, while privately trying not to provoke the powerful Manchus at his doorstep. Historians still argue whether Gwanghaegun's cautious, neutral foreign policy was a brilliant act of realpolitik that might have spared Joseon another war, or an immoral and cowardly betrayal of Confucian loyalty that ultimately doomed the kingdom anyway. The hardline scholar officials at court certainly had their opinion. To them, Gwanghaegun's pragmatism was treason. In 1623, they launched a coup, deposing him and placing a new ruler, King Injo, on the throne. This new regime proudly and loudly proclaimed its unwavering loyalty to the Ming and its open hostility to the barbarian Manchus. It was a noble, principled stand that also happened to be geopolitical suicide. You've just spent years recovering from one set of terrible neighbors, only to have your new government stand on the fence and deliberately provoke the other, even more dangerous one. The Manchu response is not long in coming. In 1627, they launch a swift invasion, easily defeat the still recovering Joseon army, and force a treaty on the kingdom. This is a warning shot. 9 years later, the situation comes to a head. The Manchu leader, Hong Taiji, has now conquered vast territories and declares a new empire, the Qing Dynasty. He demands that Joseon renounce the Ming and officially become a vassal to him. King Injo and his court, bound by their rigid ideals, refuse. The second invasion in the dead of winter of 1636 is a lesson in terror. The Manchu army, composed largely of elite cavalry, moves with stunning speed. They bypass border fortresses and pour down the peninsula. King Injo and his court barely have time to flee the capital. They can't make it to their usual wartime refuge on Ganghwa Island. The Manchu horsemen are too fast. They are forced to take shelter in the nearby mountain fortress of Sejong. You are a soldier on the walls of that fortress. The biting January wind cuts through your thin clothing. The night you are listening, now warm and humid, is a distant, impossible dream compared to the brutal cold of that siege. Your stomach is a hollow ache. The food ran out weeks ago. Men are freezing to death at their posts. Below, in the snowy valleys, you can see the endless campfires of the Manchu army and hear their chilling war cries on the wind. For 47 days you hold out, but there is no relief army coming. The kingdom is once again overrun. Finally, with no hope left, the king surrenders. And he is made to perform an act of submission so profound that its humiliation will be seared into the Korean consciousness for centuries. He must leave the fortress, ride to the camp of the Manchu emperor, and in front of the victorious Qing army, perform the ultimate ritual of surrender the kowtow. 3 times he must kneel, and with each kneel, he must bow 3 times, touching his forehead to the frozen earth. With those 9 prostrations, the independence of Joseon is broken. In the aftermath, 2 of the king's sons are taken to the Manchu capital as hostages. With them go many officials and artisans. Among the captives are 3 scholar officials who become legends. They are the Samhaksa, the 3 scholars. In the heart of the enemy's territory, they steadfastly refuse to bow to the Qing emperor or renounce their loyalty to the fallen Ming cause. Their defiance is met with execution, but their story becomes a symbol of unwavering integrity, a small spark of moral defiance in an era of total defeat, celebrated for centuries as the embodiment of the Korean spirit. Your kingdom has survived, but at a terrible price. You are now a tributary state of the Qing. Yearly tribute missions must be sent to their court. Your king rules at their pleasure. The dynasty that began with a proud general turning his army around at the Yalu River has now been brought to its knees by another army crossing that same river from the other direction. The physical scars of the Japanese war may be healing, but the psychological wound of this Manchu humiliation will fester for a very long time. The surrender is complete. The king's sons held as hostages in the Manchu capital eventually return. The war is blessedly over. Your nation, having been brutalized by the Japanese and then broken by the Manchus in the space of a single lifetime, collectively decides it has had enough of the outside world. The overwhelming political and social consensus is to lock the doors, bar the windows, and turn inward. If the world outside only brings fire and humiliation, then the world outside can be ignored. This is the beginning of the era that will earn Joseon the Western nickname, the Hermit Kingdom. The policy is born of deep collective trauma. All contact with the outside is severed, save for a few highly restricted channels. A small walled trading post on an island near Busan is the only point of contact with Japan. Any Westerners who shipwreck on your shores are treated with deep suspicion, either confined or quickly bundled off to China. The borders are sealed. You living your life somewhere in the middle of the peninsula feel the world shrink. The news you hear is local. The concerns are domestic. The grand, dangerous dramas of international politics are something you pray to be spared from. The air itself seems quieter, the ambition smaller, the focus entirely on healing what was broken within your own borders. This turn inward is one of the most debated periods in Korean history. Historians still argue whether this self-imposed isolation was a wise and necessary policy for a nation suffering from profound PTSD, allowing it to heal and reinforce its unique cultural identity, or if it was a tragic mistake that led to centuries of stagnation, leaving Joseon dangerously behind a rapidly modernizing world. Was it a protective cocoon or a self-dug grave? But here lies the great paradox of this era. Joseon was never a true hermit. The kingdom may have closed its doors to Japan and the West, but it was still a vassal of Qingchina. This relationship, born of humiliating defeat, required your government to send multiple large-scale tribute missions to Beijing every year. These journeys were long expensive and politically subservient, but they also became Joseon's only sanctioned and surprisingly rich window to the world. Imagine you are a young scholar official chosen to accompany one of these missions. It's a train of hundreds of men and horses laden with tribute goods, like high-quality paper ginseng and silver. When you finally arrive in the bustling cosmopolitan capital of the Qing Empire, it's a shock to the system. You meet envoys from Siam, from Mongolia, from Central Asia. You see Catholic missionaries, often Jesuits, who are masters of astronomy, mathematics, and cartography, serving in the Chinese court. Most importantly, you have access to Beijing's bookstores. You can acquire the latest Chinese scholarship books on Western science translated into Chinese detailed world maps, and even novelties like telescopes and clocks. These tribute missions were the most expensive and diplomatically painful shopping trips imaginable. But the knowledge you smuggled back was priceless. This trickle of new information, combined with deep soul-searching after the wars, sparked a quiet revolution in thought back home. A new intellectual movement called Silhak, or practical learning, began to take root. You find yourself drawn to its ideas. For centuries, your fellow scholar officials had been obsessed with abstract Neo-Confucian metaphysics, endless debates about the nature of human principle and material force. But the Silhak scholars, looking at their broken country, found these debates useless. They were the type to tell a philosophy professor that his theories, however elegant, wouldn't help you rebuild a bridge or improve crop yields. They focused instead on tangible reforms. They wrote proposals on restructuring the land tax system to ease the burden on peasants like the ones you met earlier. They studied agricultural techniques, cartography, and medicine. They argued for the promotion of commerce and manufacturing, things traditionally looked down upon by the Confucian elite. Figures like the great 18th century scholar Zhong Yakyong would become the giants of this movement, proposing everything from new bridge designs to radical critiques of the corrupt government. So as the night deepens around you, just before midnight, on this quiet Tuesday picture, the kingdom settling into this strange dual existence. On the surface, it is the Hermit Kingdom. Life is stable, predictable, and insular. The fields are being tilled, the dynasty is secure, and the outside world is kept at arm's length. But underneath that quiet surface, ideas are fermenting. The official ideology is rigid, but Silhak scholars are questioning everything. Catholicism trickling in through the books brought from Beijing is beginning to win converts, another source of subversive thought. The kingdom is like a quiet house at midnight, seemingly asleep, but with restless minds awake in hidden rooms, studying forbidden books by candlelight. The isolation provided a century of peace and recovery, but the world was changing, and eventually there would be a knock on the door. The long, quiet century of isolation born of trauma begins to bear strange and wonderful fruit. The peace, though insular, allows the kingdom to heal its wounds, refill its granaries, and regain its footing. As the 18th century dawns, Joseon enters its last great period of peace and prosperity, a renaissance guided by two of the dynasty's most capable kings, a father and son whose combined reigns will span nearly a century. First comes King Yongjo, who takes the throne in 1724. He is a king defined by a near-obsessive commitment to frugality and discipline. Having witnessed the lingering economic devastation from the wars, he makes it his personal mission to restore the kingdom's financial health and moral fiber. You, as his subject, would notice the change. He eschews lavish banquets for simple meals. He wears robes made of coarse cloth and is even said to have patched them himself. He becomes the ultimate royal dad, constantly nagging his officials about their expensive tastes and turning off the metaphorical lights to save the nation money. This isn't just for show. It's a powerful message that the dynasty must live within its means and put the welfare of the people before the luxury of the elite. His primary political goal is to finally tame the beast of factionalism that had torn the court apart for generations. He institutes the Tongpyong policy, the policy of grand harmony, attempting to end the bickering by appointing talented men from all factions to his government. He even promotes a signature dish, Tangpyeongchae, a colorful salad of mung bean jelly vegetables and beef, where the mixed ingredients symbolize his ideal of a balanced and harmonious government. But Yongjo's long reign is forever haunted by its most infamous and tragic event, the death of his own son, Crown Prince Sado. It's a story so dark and strange, it feels more like a grim folktale than history. The official court records written by Sado's enemies paint him as a depraved monster, a violent sadist who roamed the palace committing random acts of cruelty. The story culminates on a scorching summer day in 1762, when King Yongjo, feeling he has no other choice, orders the prince to climb into a wooden rice chest. The chest is sealed, and Sado dies of suffocation and heat stroke after 8 agonizing days. It's the worst bring your son to work day in history. But was it the truth? Historians still argue with intense passion over Sado's fate. Was he truly a madman whom his father had to eliminate to save the dynasty? Or was he a brilliant and reform-minded prince, perhaps sympathetic to new ideas like Catholicism, who was systematically framed by a rival political faction that successfully convinced the aging king of his son's insanity? The truth is likely buried forever, leaving it as Joseon's most profound and disturbing mystery. Out of this tragedy, however, comes brilliance. Sado's son eventually ascends the throne as King Jongjo in 1776. Haunted by his father's horrific death and determined to vindicate him, Jongjo becomes one of Joseon's greatest reformers. He is a workaholic, a genius, and a master politician. He fully embraces the Silhak, or practical learning movement, to push his agenda past the conservative ministers who dominate the government. He creates the Kyu-jangak, the Royal Library. It is far more than a library. It's a royal think tank, an inner circle of brilliant young scholars handpicked by the king himself. They are his personal nerd herd, tasked with researching everything from military tactics to agricultural reform, giving him the intellectual ammunition he needs to govern effectively. Jongjo's vision culminates in his masterpiece, the Hwasong Fortress in the city of Suwon. It is not just a military installation, it is a symbol of a new Joseon. You are an artisan who has been hired to work on its walls. The project is a marvel of efficiency and technology. Under the guidance of the great Silhak scholar, Jung Yak-yong, new machines, like cranes, with systems of pulleys, are designed to lift heavy stones, drastically speeding up construction. The fortress's design itself is revolutionary, blending traditional Korean architecture with the latest ideas in Western fortification, like angled bastions and cannon emplacements learned from books brought back from Beijing. Perhaps most radical of all, you and the thousands of other laborers are not conscripted peasants. You are paid a fair wage by the state for your work. The entire fortress, a massive complex structure several kilometers in circumference, is completed in just over 2 years. It stands as a testament to Jeongjo's dream of a kingdom that is strong, prosperous, modern, and just as the clock ticks past midnight. Turning Tuesday into Wednesday, this era feels like a turning point for the dynasty, a bright, high noon after a long and troubled night. For a few shining decades, under Yongjo and Jeongjo, the kingdom is stable, the arts flourish, and there is a genuine sense that the nation's chronic problems might finally be solved. But this golden age is tragically fragile. King Jeongjo, a man of boundless energy, has grand plans to reform the social structure and even move the capital to his new city of Suwon. But in 1800, at the height of his power, he dies suddenly at the age of 47. With his death, the engine of reform sputters and dies. The power he had carefully concentrated in the throne will soon dissipate, falling into the hands of the queen's family. The sun has reached its zenith, but the long, cool shadows of the 19th century are about to fall upon the kingdom. We have spent our journey with kings and generals, scholars, and invaders. But to truly understand a kingdom, we must look beyond the throne room and the battlefield. We must look at the things people created, the objects they cherished, and the beliefs that gave them comfort when official doctrines fell short. Now that we are past the midnight hour in this quiet, contemplative time, let's pause our march through history and explore the aesthetic and spiritual soul of Joseon. The official taste of the dynasty, the one promoted by the ruling Yangban elite, was one of profound and beautiful restraint. You see this most purely in Joseon white porcelain, or baekja. Forget the intricate, colorful designs of Chinese ceramics. Here the ideal was purity. You are a potter in a government-sponsored kiln, your hands shaping the fine white clay. Your goal is not technical perfection, but a natural, unforced beauty. The most iconic expression of this is the moon jar. It's a large, milky white jar, famously made by joining 2 separately thrown bowls at the center. The result is never a perfect sphere. It is slightly asymmetrical, imperfect, its shape as generous and unassuming as a full moon rising over a mountain. For the Confucian scholar, this jar was the pinnacle of beauty, simple, humble, and free of artifice. It was the ultimate in minimalist decor, a statement of philosophical principle you could also put flowers in. This aesthetic carried over into painting. The scholar official did not paint with bold colors. He painted with ink and water on paper or silk. His subjects were landscapes that reflected a cosmic order, or the 4 gentlemen, the plum blossom, wild orchid, chrysanthemum, and bamboo, each plant symbolizing a different Confucian virtue, like endurance, integrity, and grace. The art was in the brushstroke, the capturing of a subject's spirit, not its literal appearance. But if you step out of the scholar's study and into the bustling marketplace, the world explodes with color. Here you find minhwa, the paintings of the people. You're a commoner, maybe a merchant or a farmer, and you want something to brighten your home and bring you good luck. You buy a minhwa. It might be a painting of a fierce, almost cartoonish tiger whose power will scare away evil spirits. It might be a painting of two enormous carp leaping from a river, a symbol of hope that your son will pass the state exams and bring honor to the family. Or perhaps a vibrant screen covered in peonies symbolizing wealth and nobility. The style is bold, the colors are brilliant, and the perspective is delightfully flat. It is an art of pure energy and optimism. Historians still argue whether Minhua was a truly organic folk art expressing a unique popular worldview, or if it was more of a commercial enterprise with anonymous artisans simplifying the symbols of elite art for a mass market. Was it authentic expression, or just the Joseon version of buying a motivational poster for your wall? This same dynamic, a restrained official culture layered over a vibrant older tradition, is even more apparent in religion. The state ideology was Neo-Confucianism, a rational humanistic philosophy focused on social harmony and ancestor rights. Buddhism, once the state religion of Goryeo, was officially suppressed, its temples relegated to remote mountainsides. But what did you do when the harvest failed, when a sickness wouldn't leave your home, or when you were haunted by nightmares? A Confucian scholar would offer you moral platitudes. A Buddhist monk might offer prayers. But for immediate powerful results, you would seek out a mudang. The muding, almost always, a woman was the shaman. On the social ladder, she was a cheonmin, a lowborn dismissed by the educated elite as a charlatan. In reality, she was the spiritual bedrock of nearly every community in Joseon. She was your doctor, your therapist, and your direct line to the spirit world. You would hire her to perform a gutta ritual to appease a vengeful ghost, to cure a disease, or to ask the gods for a healthy child. You stand in the courtyard as she begins. The air fills with the hypnotic driving beat of her hourglass drum and the clash of cymbals. She chants, she dances, her colorful robes spinning as she enters a trance, becoming a vessel for the gods and spirits to speak through. It is loud, emotional, and deeply theatrical, a world away from the silent, solemn bows of a Confucian ceremony. Even queens in the royal palace were known to secretly call upon shamans to counteract curses or pray for the birth of a son. The mudang was the all-purpose spiritual troubleshooter for a nation that, despite its official philosophy, never lost its ancient connection to a world teeming with spirits. This is the true texture of Joseon society. It exists in the tension between the serene white moon jar on a scholar's shelf and the colorful magical tiger painted on a commoner's wall. It's found in the contrast between the rigid patriarchal order of the state and the powerful female-led spiritual authority of the local shaman. One was the austere, idealized face the dynasty presented to the world. The other was its lively, resilient, and deeply human heart. With the sudden death of the brilliant King Jeongjo in 1800, the lights go out in the Joseon court. The throne passes to his 11-year-old son, King Sunjo, and the power that Jeongjo had so carefully consolidated in the monarchy evaporates. It is seized not by a rival prince or a powerful minister, but by the family of the new king's mother, the formidable Andong Kim clan. The era of Sejong or in-law politics has begun, and with it a creeping rot that will consume the dynasty from the inside out for the next 60 years. The system is simple and devastating. A succession of young, weak kings will sit on the throne, but the real power rests with the clan of the reigning Queen Dowager. For decades, this means the Andong Kims. They install their relatives in every key position of the government. The merit-based civil service exam system the philosophical core of the dynasty becomes a sham. Why spend years studying the Confucian classics when you can just buy a post? The court becomes a marketplace where governorships and ministerial positions are sold to the highest bidder. It's a national kleptocracy, and the price is paid by the people. Your life as a peasant farmer in the fields of Chungcheong becomes a nightmare of extortion. The local magistrate, who likely paid a fortune for his job, now has to make his money back with interest. He does this by turning the tax system into a weapon against you. The three taxes on land, military service, and grain loans become engines of ruin. Corrupt officials rewrite land registers, taxing you for fields that don't belong to you. The military service tax, a cloth payment you make in lieu of your son's service, becomes grotesquely predatory. Officials levy the tax on family members who are already dead, a practice gruesomely called the white skeleton levy. They even levy it on newborn baby boys, the yellow mouth levy. You are paying taxes for your infant and your grandfather to serve in the army. The state grain loan system, designed as a safety net, becomes mandatory, forcing you to borrow grain you don't need and then pay it back at impossible interest rates. What caused this profound misery? Historians still argue whether the suffering of the 19th century peasantry was the direct result of the rapacious greed of the in-law clans, or if it was a perfect storm where this systemic corruption collided with factors beyond their control, like a series of devastating floods and droughts, widespread cattle plagues, and a growing population straining an agricultural system that could no longer support it. Was it pure human evil, or a society collapsing under its own weight? For you starving in your hut, the distinction hardly matters. The pressure builds, the anger simmers, and then in 1811, it explodes. A fallen Yangban from the northern Pyongan province, a charismatic man named Hong Gyong-nae, decides he has had enough. His region had always faced discrimination from the capital, its people barred from the most powerful government posts. He expertly weaves this regional resentment together with the peasants' universal fury at the corrupt regime. He amasses a huge army of angry farmers, struggling merchants and miners, and launches a massive rebellion. For several months, he is master of the North, his revolt a terrifying shock to the elites in Hanyang. The rebellion is eventually crushed, with overwhelming military force its leaders executed. But it proves that the quiet suffering of the people has found a voice, and that voice is shouting for revolution. This is only the beginning. The century will be scarred by revolt after revolt, culminating in another massive peasant uprising in 1862. With the formal channels of government completely corrupted, rebellion becomes the only meaningful form of political expression left to you. The kingdom is crumbling. The treasury is bankrupt. The ruling class is parasitic, and the countryside is a tinderbox of rage. The quiet, insulated peace of the Hermit kingdom has curdled into the silence of despair. As the clock on this new Wednesday morning ticks onward past midnight, the darkness outside your window is a perfect mirror for the state of the nation. The house of Joseon is rotting from within its foundations, eaten away by corruption. The doors may still be locked to the outside world, but the walls are beginning to collapse on their own. And this internal weakness could not have come at a worse time, because on the far horizon, new ships with strange flags are starting to appear, and the knocking on the door is about to begin. It is the 1860s. Your kingdom is a house with rotten foundations and locked doors. The political decay from 60 years of in-law rule has left the government bankrupt and the military weak. Just as the internal crisis reaches its peak, a new ruler takes charge, not a king, but a regent. He is the Hungseon Daewongun, the stern and forceful father of the young boy king Gojong. He is a man of iron will, and he has two goals: to crush the corrupt aristocratic clans at home and to smash any foreign hands that dare to knock on Korea's door. He succeeds at the first, but the second will consume the final decades of the dynasty. The knocking begins in 1866. It comes from France. The Daewongun, in a furious assertion of Confucian orthodoxy, has authorized a massive persecution of the growing Catholic faith, executing 9 French missionaries and thousands of Korean converts. The French Navy retaliates. You are a soldier garrisoned on Gonghwa Island, the heavily fortified island that guards the sea lanes to the capital. One day, you see them black-hulled ships moving without sails, spewing smoke coming up the river against the current. The French fleet attacks and occupies your fortress. They are eventually fought to a standstill and withdraw, but not before they pillage the royal archives on the island, stealing a priceless collection of illustrated books detailing royal protocols. It's perhaps the world's most violent and aggressive overdue library fee. 5 years later, in 1871, another fleet appears. This time, it's the United States sending an expedition to demand an explanation for the destruction of an American merchant schooner, the General Sherman, a few years earlier. Again, diplomacy fails, and cannons roar. American Marines storm the forts on Gonghwa Island. They win the battle, but fail to force the Koreans to negotiate, and they too eventually withdraw. For the Daewongun, these are victories. He has faced down 2 powerful Western nations. He celebrates by erecting stone tablets across the country, engraved with a stark warning: to not fight when the Western barbarians invade is to appease them. To appease them is to sell out the country. His policy was unbending, but was it wise? Historians still argue whether the Daewongun's fierce isolationism was a brave, patriotic last stand to defend Korea's sovereignty from the maw of imperialism, or if it was a tragically short-sighted policy that wasted a crucial decade preventing Korea from modernizing and learning from the outside world when it still had the chance. While Joseon was busy repelling Western ships, the most dangerous threat was quietly modernizing next door. Japan, forced open by American gunboats in the 1850s, had transformed itself with astonishing speed during the Meiji Restoration. Now it has a modern army, a modern navy, and a modern imperial ambition. And it decides to use on Korea the very same tactic that was used on it. In 1875, a sleek Japanese warship, the Unyo, deliberately sails into the restricted waters around your fortress on Gonghwa Island. As your cannons fire predictable warning shots, the Unyo unleashes the overwhelming power of its modern Armstrong guns, shattering your defenses. The incident is a complete setup. The following year, Japan uses this unprovoked attack as a pretext to send a fleet of 6 powerful warships and an army of envoys to Korea. They anchor off your coast and propose a treaty of friendship and trade. It's the kind of friendly negotiation that involves pointing cannons at your palace. The Daewongun is no longer in power, and the young King Gojong and his court, intimidated and utterly outmatched, have no choice but to sign. The Treaty of Gonghwa, signed in 1876, is the beginning of the end. It opens 3 Korean ports to Japanese trade. It grants Japanese citizens in Korea extraterritoriality, the right to be tried by their own laws, not yours. And most cunningly, its first article declares that Korea is an independent state enjoying the same sovereign rights as Japan. This seems positive, but it is a legal dagger designed to sever Korea's centuries-old tributary bond to China, prying you away from one empire's orbit so you can be pulled into another's. The sealed doors of the Hermit Kingdom have been kicked open. The centuries of quiet isolation are shattered forever. One treaty is followed by another with the United States, with Britain, with Germany, with Russia. Your port cities are now filled with foreign merchants, missionaries, and diplomats, all with their own competing agendas. The internal decay of your kingdom is now matched by a flood of external pressures. The final chaotic act of the Joseon Dynasty, a drama to be played out on a stage crowded with the world's great powers, has just begun. The doors have been kicked in, and the world in all its chaotic and predatory glory has rushed into your kingdom. The last decades of the Joseon Dynasty are a frantic, desperate scramble to survive in a world that no longer plays by any rules you recognize. Your capital, Hanyang, is no longer just a Korean city. It's a nest of international intrigue. The Japanese, Chinese, Russian, and American legations are like vultures, perched around a weakened animal, each waiting for their moment. The court, once split by Confucian debates, is now fractured along geopolitical lines, pro-Japanese modernizers clashing with pro-Chinese conservatives, with everyone keeping a wary eye on the Russians. In this chaos, some see a chance for radical change. In 1884, a group of young, impatient reformers, backed by the Japanese, launch a coup. They seize the king, occupy the palace, and announce a sweeping program of modernization modeled on Meiji Japan. Their new, enlightened government lasts for exactly 3 days before Chinese troops stationed in the city to protect their own interests storm the palace and crush the rebellion. 3 days is barely enough time to get comfortable on the throne, let alone remake a 500-year-old kingdom. The Korean peninsula is now a chessboard, and you are the pawn. Your fate is decided by others. The simmering rivalry between Qing China and Imperial Japan explodes into the First Sino-Japanese War in 1894, fought on your land and in your waters. You watch as modern disciplined Japanese forces systematically dismantle the ancient Chinese army. When the smoke clears, Japan is victorious, and China's centuries-long influence over Korea is shattered for good. This leaves many of your countrymen to wonder, and historians still argue today, whether Joseon's fate was sealed by its own internal paralysis and political infighting, or if any attempt at independent reform was doomed from the start, crushed under the inescapable weight of its neighbors' ambitions. In the wake of the war, with Japan as the dominant power, a new wave of reforms is pushed through. But your king Taejong fears he is becoming a Japanese puppet. In a dramatic move, he flees his own palace and takes refuge in the Russian legation, ruling from there for an entire year. When he finally returns to his own palace in 1897, he makes one last bold stand for sovereignty. He proclaims the founding of the Great Korean Empire, the Daehan Jaeguk. He casts off the title of king, a title that implies vassalage, and declares himself Emperor Gwangmu, an equal to the emperors of China and Japan. For a brief, flickering moment, it feels like a new dawn. You see the signs of modernity springing up all over the capital. Western-style stone buildings rise next to traditional wooden halls. A modern postal service connects the cities. And in 1899, the most incredible sight of all appears an electric streetcar running on tracks laid right down the city's main avenues. You can hear its bell and watch it glide past, a symbol of progress, a promise of a modern future. But the embrace of modernity is often clumsy and violent. When a streetcar accidentally strikes and kills a child, An angry mob, convinced the machine is demonic, attacks it and burns it to the ground. It's a tragic, potent symbol of your nation's painful collision with the modern age. But the title of emperor is just a title if you don't have the army to defend it. The final piece falls into place when Japan goes to war with Russia in 1904, once again fighting over who will control your peninsula. Japan wins. With no rivals left, they move to swallow Korea whole. In 1905, Japanese soldiers surround the palace, and Emperor Gojong's ministers are forced to sign the Yulsa Treaty, turning the Korean Empire into a protectorate of Japan. Your nation no longer has a foreign policy. All of its diplomatic relationships are now handled by a Japanese resident general. Heroic pockets of resistance flare up, righteous armies of scholars and farmers fighting desperately in the countryside, but they are hunted down and crushed. Finally, in August of 1910, the final humiliating treaty is signed. The Korean Empire is formally annexed into the Empire of Japan. The Joseon Dynasty, which had begun 518 years earlier with a general's defiant march, ends not with a bang, but with the quiet scratching of a pen, its sovereignty signed away. And so, our long journey through 5 centuries of glory and tragedy, of innovation and invasion, comes to a close. The story of Joseon, which began with the ambition of a founding king, ends with the quiet grief of a lost empire. The intricate politics of the court, the thunder of cannons at sea, the vibrant colors of the marketplace and the solemn rituals of the palace all fade now into the soft stillness of history. The grand narrative recedes, leaving behind only the gentle echo of a story told. Let the final images of charging armies and electric streetcars dissolve. Allow the clamor of a kingdom's final desperate years to soften into silence. Your mind, which has traveled so far tonight, can now return home. Feel the weight of your own body, safe and comfortable in your bed. Feel the gentle rise and fall of your own breath, here in the quiet of your own room. The long night of history is over, and the peaceful darkness of your own night is all that remains. There are no more battles to witness, no more decrees to read. There is only rest. Let the story go and allow yourself to drift into the deep, restorative quiet that awaits you. All is calm now. All is peaceful. Sweet dreams.